World War I Western Front, 1916. The letter he never sent. When we opened my father's trunk after the funeral, we expected uniforms, medals, perhaps a photograph. What we found were 143 letters, all addressed to my mother, all sealed, none of them ever sent. My mother looked at them for a long time without speaking. Then she said, "I always knew he was writing them. I just didn't know there were so many." 143. I counted them twice. They were bundled in groups of 10 or 12, tied with kitchen string, stacked in the trunk with a neatness that told me he had arranged them deliberately, not shoved them in, not hidden them, but placed them there with the careful hands of a man who had decided something and wanted it kept. My father's name was Arthur Lowe. Schoolteacher. Mathematics. Coventry. He enlisted in 1915 at 31, older than most of the men around him, and he wrote to my mother throughout the entire war regularly, reliably, 2 or 3 letters a month. Those letters I had already read. They were careful, affectionate, occasionally dry in the way he was dry. They told her he was well. They asked after the garden. They were the letters of a man who had made a decision about what his wife needed to know and what she did not. The letters in the trunk were the other decision. He wrote 2 letters. Every time. For the entire war. One he sent. One he kept. The one he sent said, "I am well. The weather has been poor but manageable. I think of you and James constantly. Give my regards to your sister." The one he kept said everything else. I found this out on the first night, reading by the kitchen table after my mother had gone to bed. The opening line of the very first letter, dated the night before the Somme offensive, the 1st of July 1916, stopped me so completely that I set it down and did not pick it up again for several minutes. It said, "Clara, I have just sealed the letter I will post tomorrow. This is the letter I couldn't put in that envelope. I don't know what to do with it except write it. So I am writing it." That was when I understood what I was holding. Not one man's correspondence. 143 acts of silent endurance, everything he absorbed, everything he witnessed, everything he refused to make her carry. The Somme letter ran to 11 pages. I will not quote it at length. I will say only that my father, who was a precise and economical man with language, used 11 pages because 11 pages were apparently what that night required. He wrote about the sound of the guns in the hours before the whistle, a bombardment so immense that the word bombardment does not contain it, that men spoke directly into each other's ears and still couldn't be heard. He wrote about a boy named Davies from Cardiff, 17 years old, who had shown him a photograph of his mother so many times that my father could have described her face from memory. He wrote about the particular quality of the dark at 4 in the morning, when you know what 4 in the morning is going to become. And then, at the bottom of the 11th page, in handwriting slightly different from the rest, slightly less controlled, the letters unevenly spaced in a way I had never seen in anything else he wrote, he said, "Davies is gone. Most of them are gone. I watched things today that I will not describe because the describing would make them more real, and they are already real enough. I am alive. I don't entirely know how to feel about that." That was July 2nd, 1916. The second letter. The one he kept. There is a letter from the winter of 1917 that I have returned to more than any other. Not because it is the most dramatic, it isn't. It is one of the shorter ones. But it is the one where something breaks. He had been writing steadily for 2.5 years by then, 2 letters every time, the sent one and the kept one, the careful performance and the private truth. For 2.5 years he had maintained the architecture of it, held the 2 versions of his life apart with what must have been enormous and constant effort. In this letter he doesn't describe anything specific. There are no names, no dates, no events. He simply writes in the same uneven handwriting I had seen once before. In the song letter he simply writes, "Clara. I don't know how much longer I can hold the 2 things separately. I am very tired. Not in the body. In whatever part of a person decides to keep going. I am writing this and I don't know what I am asking for. I suppose I am not asking for anything. I suppose I just needed to say it somewhere." And then, on the next line, his handwriting straightens again. The letters even out. He finishes the page in his normal hand and folds it and puts it with the others. He never sent it. He never told her. He straightened his handwriting and kept going. Threaded through all 143 letters through the darkness and the mud and the winter of 1917, there is one thing he returns to constantly. A Sunday afternoon before the war. A walk. A particular road outside Coventry, in September, in a specific quality of late light that he describes differently each time, as though he is still trying to get it exactly right. He wrote about that road in the song letter and in the Passchendaele letters and in the letters from the last winter when the war was almost over but not yet over, which he seemed to understand was its own particular cruelty. He wrote about it the way a man tends a fire, returning to it, feeding it, keeping it alive because he needed it to stay lit. In one letter he wrote, "I think if I can keep that road clear in my mind I will be all right." I don't know why that road specifically. I think it was just a moment when I knew while it was happening, not afterward, that everything was exactly right. Most of the time you only know afterward. That afternoon I knew during. I have been living off it ever since. My father came home. He went back to teaching. He was a quiet man, steady, not cold but not demonstrative, the kind of presence that holds a room without filling it. He and my mother lived 40 more years in the same house. He died at 74 in the bedroom where he had always slept, in the spring, without drama. He never mentioned the letters. Not once. He had written 143 of them, carried them home across the channel in a trunk, stored them in the attic for 4 decades, and said nothing. Perhaps he meant to burn them. Perhaps he simply couldn't bring himself to. I have decided not to know which it was. Both answers cost something, and he paid enough. My mother read them after I did. It took her several months. When she finished she came downstairs one morning and put them back in the trunk in their bundles and closed the lid and stood with her hands flat on top of it, very still, for a long time. I asked her what she was thinking. She said, "He spent 3 years making sure I didn't know what he was going through. And then he kept the proof of it in our attic for 40 years. She paused. I used to wonder sometimes why he was so quiet. Why certain things made him go somewhere else. I used to think it was something I had done. She lifted her hands from the trunk. It was 143 letters, she said. That's what it was. He just never found a way to give them to me.